So I'd like to first start off by setting the stage and then identifying the challenges and concerns of this new exciting era. So, everyone recognizes that exciting innovations are occurring in data analytics, AI, machine learning, and other applied fields. And there are those who argue that these developments are part of a broader technological societal shift that is monumental enough to constitute, quote unquote, a fourth industrial revolution. Regardless of whether you subscribe to this view, I think it's clear that the ensuing digital era has brought with it its own set of challenges. And I would like to start the discussion by asking the panel to identify some of the major challenges we face as a society in navigating the new era. So I'd like to start with Dr. Singh, and perhaps you could chime in from the perspective of individual consumers and end users as to what are the challenges they face in the new era.
So I think from a consumer's perspective, really a big question is what's going on. In some sense, how do people actually understand or realize what the systems that are surrounding their life, impacting everyday life, are actually doing? Given that we're talking about data governance, if we start thinking about personal data, what actually happens to the data that you pass on? Once it's out of your hands, it's very difficult to know what happens to that data, at least at a technical level. And this is quite important, as the burden is quite often on the individual to decide whether they want to use a particular service, do they give consent, and so forth. So without an understanding of how that data is going to be used, processed, etc., it's quite difficult to actually be informed as to make a proper decision. So I think and understanding is a key challenge here, and there's been a bunch of work that's shown that a lot of times people feel that actually technology is being done to us rather than actually being onboarded with the technological development process. So I think more information for consumers is quite important. And some of this might involve more knowledge about the technology itself, the technological inner workings. That probably has a role. But also sort of more information about what's the risks of using a particular technology, the impacts, who are the stakeholders involved, who's actually benefiting from this particular technological component, application, service, and so forth. How accessible are the explanations and justifications for using this particular technology? What are the outputs, etc. And I think people care more about these issues as we see things such as smart cities, the Internet of Things becoming a reality. Because before, people were talking about privacy and data-related harms, but maybe for the average person, it's a bit intangible as to what the potential downsides might be. But once we start seeing physical harms, things exploding, or I can't get out of my house, or things like that, I think this makes the sort of issues a lot more tangible, and then people will start engaging more.
So let me give you a brief introduction of what Naver and Naver Labs do into the fourth industrial revolution. So Naver started investing in artificial intelligence or deep learning, machine learning in 2000, probably 2011, even before. So we're incorporating deep learning technology into acoustic model of the speech recognition about 7 years ago. So we have increased quality of speech recognition 5 or 6 years ago, and we later moved on to the machine computer vision based on the deep learning. So we added photo classification feature in Naver Cloud, and we came up with AI chatbot software in what we call TalkTalk. And then we go into machine learning, machine translation technology. So we call it Papago, came out from Naver Labs. And then we move on to the facial recognition, the recommendations, and so forth. So in 2016, we come up with the AI speaker technology called Clova, which has a speech recognition, text-to-speech, and natural language processing, natural language understanding, and also that connects all the services that's based on the currently based on text only. So Clova is so we call the AI conversation interface platform that connects the user and the services and the content in the new platform, in computing platform. So most of these R&D were done at Naver Labs, And Naver Labs is a wholly owned subsidiary of Naver at this point. And then we moved on to fourth industrial revolution that includes autonomous driving and robotics and augmented reality. And also associated indoor and outdoor geospatial information intelligence, we call the 3D and HD and digital twin, mapping and digital twin technology. And all these is to help to bring the Naver service value into offline and the physical spaces and mobility. So we're basically building a platform in which location and mobility-based contents and service providers can thrive. So all these AI movements, it all comes down to the user value. So all the smart speaker, chatbots, and whatever, they all becomes an ambient infrastructure. And whatever left over will be a contents and the service value and the data. So the mission of the Naver Labs is the ambient intelligence, not artificial intelligence. So the artificial intelligence is just a tool. It's one of the tools that we could provide better services and better values and bring the computation to the ambient, so our everyday lives. So specifically for domains of the research that we are doing is that autonomous driving. So we got the government approval in 2017, early 2017. We're up to SAE level 4. As a side note, Google is close to SAE level 5. And the spectrum of the technology that involves the autonomous driving is the HD mapping and real-time perception and the localization of cars and path planning and control. So we do have all these technology and regarding autonomous driving. We're particularly interested in HD mapping and perception area. And we're concentrated on metropolitan straight autonomous driving rather than highway autonomous driving. In robotics, we are concentrating on building the autonomous indoor mapping robots, and which is called autonomous indoor HD mapping. And also we're bringing up the autonomous, the mobile service robot platform that's based on the autonomous indoor mapping robots. And this becomes new computing platform. So we have been using smartphone as a device platform, PC web and smartphone. Now, as the computing reaches the everyday life and all the hardware and software, AI technology and network computation is moving forward, and we're beginning to see all these emerge into everyday life and in the ambient. So the next computing platform could be the connected car, or robots, or the autonomous driving car itself, or the AR glasses, or your walls, or your home. So the first wave of that technology was the home speaker, smart speaker. And we're particularly interested in bringing the digital twin technology into our lives because that's how it's like the same thing as a search engine. What search engine do is that you crawl all these web documents and you bring them into an index model, and then whenever you search and query, and it ranks and it shows you search results. And it's the same thing in physical world. You have to map all these spaces in 3D spaces in HD. These are all used for the autonomous driving car, robots, or even AR glasses. Even just regular the navigation system might need a HD map. So we acquired a 3D mapping company called Naver early last year. So all these technology that we are bringing, so the challenges that we have is that recruiting people. So the recruiting people and retaining those people, we have about more than 1,000 engineers working on AIs, machine learning, and information retrieval, and 3D mapping, traffic engine, traffic intelligence, and predictive traffic, and so forth. So we do see a sudden surge in the salary hikes. And also the people, students come to this party for the sake of the AI itself. So most of the AI research stays in the research, not actual problem solving. Most people don't realize this, but a lot of AI researchers are just doing the research for the sake of research. So not many AI research actually translates into actual problem solving at this point. So what we do is that we try to accelerate this technology startup ecosystem by putting the Digital Startup Factor that we announced. And we have reviewed about 2,000 the startups for incubation, and we have invested about 30 companies, and we acquired 4 companies last year alone. So that was the first challenge that we have faced with at this point. And the second one is the sudden hike in computing infrastructure. So we need lots of data, so we need lots of GPU computing power to process all that. So we need to make a model, and then we need to inference when we have to serve. So we need more powers in IDC spaces. We need more IDC spaces for computing infrastructure. So we need to invest a whole lot more in this GPU computing infrastructure. So the next one will be the data tagging. So the inferencing and the quality of the model is based on data itself. So the more data doesn't translate into better data. So we need a better data for tagging. So we need a lot of tagging people. So these are very labor intensive. So the AI is actually a very labor intensive technology. So we so much data tagging. So we need to store all these data. Some models are really, really big. So we need the investment in storage as well. And also tagging jobs. And so to move on, these are all the internal challenges. So that we move on to the relationship with the governments. For the governments, we basically have, as you probably know, has too much red tapes and no tapes. So which means that whatever we are trying to do, there's no law or there's no policy. And so we have no central tower to control all these. Let's say we come up with a new battery. So we need a new battery for this particular robots. So there's nobody who wants to certify that battery. So we need all these policy, no tapes. So we need this central tower to possibly do some sort of certification of all these for the new fourth industrial revolution. And let's say there are too many branches and municipals and cities and city governments to talk to whenever you are trying to map the entire world, because some of the street updates, road networks, and stop signs, and you need to talk to individual municipals to get an update on these. So there's no control tower, a central control tower. And also they need to be a platform for all these service providers, and they need to connect all these service providers by providing all the open data and also geospatial data. But they rather want to be a private sector these services. So that's one of the problem with the relationship with the government. And also, not only the government, we have some problems in incumbent players in each industry. For example, the automakers, financial industries, and transportation industry. Give a very example, to accelerate autonomous driving technology, the automakers has to open up their non-fatal, non-critical data, the CAN data. Let's say how much they accelerate, how much they put the acceleration brakes, and so forth, but they don't open their data from the car. So there's no way for autonomous driving technology startups can get those data. So not only the government, but also the incumbent players who are already in the existing industry, we have challenges. Yes, I guess that's.
I think it's very helpful to hear the challenges that firms face internally and externally. And that was very insightful. So we've heard about challenges individual consumers face, firms face, and maybe briefly, if Director General Kim can share with us some of the challenges that regulators or policymakers face in the new era.
As introduced, I'm Hyung Kim, Director General Korea Federal Commissioner. For the sake of audience, almost here are Koreans, and because I'm not so good at English, so I'm gonna use Korean, which will be translated into the English. I feel sorry for non-Korean natives, and especially for the 3 foreign participants in this session. 그 데이터를 기반으로 한 그 데이터 경제 그리고 데이터를 활용한 AI는 경쟁 당국하고 소비자 당국 그리고 그밖에 규제 당국들에게 상당한 그 도전과 숙제를 안겨준 게 사실입니다. 특히 이제 그 섹터별 규제 당국 그리고 이제 경쟁 당국에게는 현재도 저희들이 이 산업 방향이 어떻게 갈지 그리고 이 기술의 실체가 뭘지 솔직하게 저희들이 잘 모릅니다. 그래서 지금 저희들이 뭐 학계와 또는 산업계와 협업하여 이 문제를 경제법 또는 소비자 보호 차원에서 어떻게 대응할 것인지 그리고 기본적으로 규제 당국은 신산업은 기본적으로 소비자와 경제에 도움이 된다는 기본적인 인식을 가지고 있기 때문에 이 산업이 잘 되길 바랍니다. 하지만 그 과정에서 뭐 여기 계신 분들 다 아시다시피 소비자들의 이익을 해치거나 또는 또 다른 경쟁자들 또는 잠재 경쟁자들의 피해를 주는 경우만은 저희들이 사후적으로 좀 규제를 해야 되겠다 이런 입장이고요. 경쟁 당국 또는 소비자 당국에 근무하는 저로서는 아마 그 모더레이터께서 구체적인 질문을 하실 텐데 그때 저희 입장을 제 개인적인 입장입니다. 저희 조직 입장은 아니고 그때 제가 자세히 말씀드리겠습니다. 고맙습니다.
I'll start off with a question to Professor Felten and Dr. Singh. So there are some that argue that challenges in the digital era, some of which we've just discussed, cannot be resolved by current legal or social norms, and that they will require responses that integrate technological solutions. Now, some have even gone further to argue that code-based technological solutions will have to or will eventually supplant regulatory regimes because they provide superior solutions to these challenges. I'd like to ask Professor Felten and Dr. Singh what their thoughts are and what does this portend for regulation in the new era? Perhaps more specifically, how can regulators integrate technology as part of the regulatory response, and are they equipped for the task?
I would expect a mixed approach to this, not purely technological, not purely regulation and governance. These problems are complex and ever-changing, and I don't think that either technology or regulation alone will be enough to manage them. To me, one of the most important questions is how the interface between the technical and the societal aspects of governance can operate. Technology can address certain aspects of these issues, and I think that developers and deployers of the technology over time will have to take on responsibility for building in technical safeguards of certain kinds. But at the same time, there are many aspects of accountability that require a rich dialogue between the technical and governmental. I think it is a challenge for government agencies to make sure that they have the right kind of expertise in-house and that their decision-making processes are able to incorporate expert advice without simply turning over the keys to the experts.
I largely agree. When you talk to technologists that maybe haven't thought about the wider context in which they work, sometimes they say, well, just tell us what the law says and we'll code it. They're not appreciating how complex the law is, or the it depends sort of nature, as many other lawyers in the room will resonate with. At the same time, you also get sometimes responses that technology is neutral, not appreciating that there's various design decisions at various steps. So certainly don't want to go into a code is law sort of debate, but certainly a mixed approach does seem the way forward. In our own work, how we try and describe it is more that the technologies that we build try to assist. So it might help assist various design processes, building safeguards into things as well, but also the technology can help with maybe managing things that the operation of these systems, facilitating audit and investigation, facilitating empowerment, etc. So in other words, you can have technological tools which actually might help you control things, manage things better, or provide information that could be useful across the spectrum for users, regulators, as well as those people building and deploying technologies. So yeah, technology is certainly not the sole answer. These are techno-social systems, and so they're solutions across the spectrum.
Ms. Brill, maybe I could give you an opportunity to comment. I also would like you to sort of follow on a related question of what people also talk about private regulation. So in this era, with these set of challenges, how would a regulator or policymaker relegate parts of the task to the private sector? Are there distinct challenges for this era that we haven't seen before?
Thank you. These are really interesting questions. I've been in this space for a very long time, as I mentioned, 30 years or so. And if you take a look at the history of technology and advances in technology, you see that the technology always outruns the law. The law is always catching up. And that's just the world we live in. And it does mean that companies need to act in a responsible way and need to be thinking deeply about things because the law just simply doesn't exist. And frankly, I think the law shouldn't exist. In other words, I don't think people should jump in, that is, regulators should jump in and start regulating when they really don't understand the technology and they don't understand precisely what the risks are. I've identified some, but there are lots of different ways to be thinking about this, and I think some of it does actually require time to mature. So some examples that we've seen in history, forgive me, I'm going to be using some examples from the United States, but I think these will resonate here with all of you as well. Cars were on the road for a very long time, and there were accidents all over the place before systems of assigning liability were truly developed, at least in the United States. It took years for the courts to work out who was actually responsible and what the rules of the road would be. Similarly, pharmaceuticals were on the market for a very long time before, at least in the United States, the society agreed that there should be an agency that actually regulated pharmaceuticals and their safety and soundness. And I'm not saying that it shouldn't have happened earlier, it probably should have, but I think to really develop a robust regulatory system, you have to kind of figure out what the right thing to do is. The last example I'll give is tobacco. And it also took a long time to regulate tobacco, at least in the United States. But what we're seeing now, again in the United States, I have a feeling this is happening here too, is consumers are moving to vaping. And there's a big controversy around the extent to which vaping should or shouldn't be regulated. Is it safe or isn't it safe? I'm speaking as someone who many years ago sued the tobacco industry, so I'm not saying that I'm sympathetic necessarily to much of what happened with respect to the history of tobacco, but I do think there are legitimate scientific questions with respect to vaping. So I'm just setting those out as examples for why regulators, I think, need to be smart and need to think about high-level principles before they jump in and regulate specific technologies. So for instance, there's going to be a lot of encouragement to regulators here in Korea, to regulators in the United States, to regulators everywhere to jump in and actually create AI-specific regulations. We at Microsoft have written a book, and we said that eventually we do think that there will be AI-specific regulations, but we don't think we're ready for it as a society yet. We still think that there are lots of questions that need to be answered. So what does this mean? This means that companies absolutely must act in responsible ways because there is no law, and there likely won't be a law, as I am indicating, really anytime soon. That is a specific AI law. So what we need to do is we need to develop the kind of ethical frameworks that I talked about. And responsible companies will do that, and then there will be irresponsible companies that won't do that. And when those companies are taking information from consumers and using it in troubling ways, it's going to set back the entire industry because individuals will not trust that their data is being used appropriately. Can I just offer one quick other response to what my colleague sitting next to me said about the need for giving more information to individuals, because I think that that's also a really interesting question. When I was at the Federal Trade Commission, one of the things that we worried about was actually giving individuals too much information. And I'm not disagreeing with you. I think individuals do need more information, but what they need is digestible and understandable information. And so there's a lot of work underway now to try to think about, and this is some of what Ed was alluding to with respect to explainability, how do you give individuals information that is consumable and useful? At the FTC, we talked about just-in-time information. Some of your colleagues, maybe this is in Oxford, not in Cambridge, so forgive me, it might be the competitors down the road, are thinking about things like counterfactual explanations. That is, if you had been denied a loan through an AI system, that you're told not just that you're denied the loan, but what would have, if something had been different in your profile, like your income had been a little higher, maybe you lived in a different zip code, whatever the algorithm determined, but if that thing were different, then you might have been granted the loan, or at a different rate. That kind of counterfactual explanation, I think, is brilliant. I actually am deeply supportive of the work that's going on, because it's consumable, it's usable, it's understandable. I think that's the trick for regulators, is really to think through how to provide information, more information for sure, but information that is really understandable and comes at the right time for individuals.